Stay tuned to part 2 of the interview with JoNina, Ervin, and Lorenzo Ervin. JoNina was the former editor of the Black Panther newspaper, and Lorenzo was and is a revolutionary and was a Black Panther member who was tortured by the U.S. government. Stay tuned to parts 2 of 3. Let's pivot over to you, JoNina. How did you get involved, or how did you become the editor of the Black Panther paper?
Well, in the Detroit chapter, at some point they had called most of the chapters in the country to all come to Oakland because they wanted Oakland to become the party's base of operation. And so we went to Oakland in early 1974, and I joined the newspaper staff. I had studied journalism when I was in college, so they put me, on the newspaper staff. And then so this was the early 74 when we got there. And then in 78, I became the editor of the paper. The brother who had been the editor, he resigned from the party. He left the party, so I guess I was next in line, so I became the editor of the paper.
The Black Panther paper lasted for some time. When did it get started, and how long did it run?
The first issue was published in 67, and the last issue was published in 1980, September 1980. So that was 13 years, yeah.
And what was in your recollection? What do you see? What did you write about? What stands out?
Well, we covered we covered stuff that was happening in Oakland, of course, but the different chapters and branches of the party, they would send us news from their cities. So we were getting news from all around the country. And we also had a section of the paper where we would deal with international news in different countries, a little that we thought would be of interest to oppressed people. And so we had the international section that would include what was from Africa, the Caribbean, Asia. We had a lot of reporting about the Vietnam War in the newspaper. So we had a regular column that dealt with the prison movement, or we called it Behind the Walls, and people who were locked up. They would send us letters, we published in the paper about what was going. They would write us what was happening in their prison and their struggle, and we would cover any kind of events that we thought had some impact on people of color, Black people, poor people. So it was a very wide variety of topics that we talked about.
It was 25 cents.
It was 25 cents. This is one of my favorite stories about the Black Panthers newspaper. It was a powerful paper. One time, I believe I was in Oakland, I was selling the paper. So a brother gave me a quarter for it, and I was handing this paper. And he said, "No, man," he said, "I don't know how to read. I can't read it. So you just keep the paper and you give it to somebody who can read." But even though he couldn't read it, he knew how powerful it was. I mean, that blew my mind, though.
He knew how powerful it was, also the government. So what did they do to curtail, or did they curtail the distribution of the paper?
Yeah, that was one of the campaigns that of the FBI counterintelligence program. They did a number of things. One thing that they would do is that they would do whatever they could to disrupt. We would ship papers to different cities in the country. So when they got to different airports, they would confiscate the papers, or in some cases they broke into a warehouse where they were stored and doused them in water, and things like that to try to actually destroy the publication itself. So yeah, they were very intent on paper not getting the word out. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FBI back in those days, he felt like the Black Panther newspaper was extremely dangerous because of what it was reporting. He knew that it was reporting. He felt like the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program for children. He said that was the single most dangerous program we had because Hoover was a racist, but he wasn't stupid. He understood what it meant for us to be feeding breakfast to poor children. He understood the power of that program, and that helped us get a lot of support. Everybody in the Black community was not necessarily involved, wasn't into the armed self-defense part. When we started serving kids free breakfast, and we started free food program, and we had these other community-based programs, that's when our support grew, because we were dealing with the concrete, everyday material needs of people. And when you serve people food, the breakfast program, what it did was it showed about, the poverty and hunger in the United States. They shined a new light on that. The fact that a lot of kids would go to school every day on an empty stomach.
You also had a free clinic program.
That's right, we had a free clinic program, healthcare. We were able to recruit some doctors to help us and some other health professionals that would help us. We were able to offer some free services. We drew national attention to sickle cell anemia, which had been ignored by the federal health services. Black Panther Party started the first national pre-testing for sickle cell anemia in the United States. And, we said, well, no, this is not being done because it primarily affects people of color and Black people. We started a program on the sickle cell anemia test. It was things like this that really got us the support from the community, because we were dealing with their everyday needs.
So interesting. So you said Hoover said that the breakfast program was a threat. Well, if so, it seems like you're saying that he felt that if the Black Panthers were self-contained and could take care of themselves, were socialized for self, then that's a threat.
But even more was the whole issue of if the government would not or could not feed children, then or give them programs or for school where they could have food, then what's their justification? Here's a small organization, no more than 5,000 members nationwide, that's feeding children all over the country, Black kids in the ghetto all over the country, and the government is not giving them anything. So it became a contradiction and a source of complaints against the federal government for their refusal to create a breakfast for children program. And this is the reason why he felt, one of the reasons why he felt, is the fact, the very example of children being fed and it wasn't being broadcast all over nationwide TV, and the federal government they had all the resources, but they wouldn't use those resources for Black kids in the community.
So just the optics, it seems, created a threat. Before we pivot to current situations, what might stand out in your mind that you experienced from the stories you told us? Some of the things that affected you, besides the story about the man who gave you 25 cents for the paper and couldn't read.
Well, I was the editor of the paper when the situation developed. You remember down in Jonestown, in Guyana, and the Black Panther Party had a close relationship with the People's Temple in San Francisco because they had community programs, and they we held some similar beliefs and everything. I knew I had a friend who was in People's Temple. And, at some point they decided People's Temple, which was a largely Black organization, they decided that they were going to go to Guyana and just leave the United States. And see, in the Black Panther Party, we viewed that as a major statement, the same, we feel like we can't live, these people, poor people can't live in dignity and respect in the United States, so then we're going to go to another country. And we thought, wow, this is a tremendous political statement that they were making. And so, like I said, we knew them. We knew a lot of them. And then, of course, I worked on, once the whole thing had come up, had developed about the so-called massacre, but that stories had begun to develop about what was going on.
Could you bring our audience up to par in case they don't know about what happened in Guyana, Jones incident?
Okay, yes. So in November, I believe it was November of 1978, somewhere around there, the news developed that over 900 people, the bodies of over 900 people who had been in the Jonestown settlement in Guyana, were found. They were dead. And people thought it was a, mass suicide or whatever. We may never know what really happened there. Some say it was a mass suicide, that the leader, Jim Jones, had brainwashed the people into getting them to drink a drink that would cause them to commit suicide. Because there had been stories developing about problems in Jonestown, the government had started looking into it. When a congressman had come down to investigate, so they were getting attention from the federal government. And actually, believe the congressman was actually killed at the point they were trying to lead, and there was some kind of a shootout down there. Like I said, we don't ever know what all the real details were, but he was killed, and I believe a news person was killed, and all these kind of things. As those headlines developed, and then soon after that, the bodies of these over 900 people were found. And in the Black Panther Party, we thought that somehow the government had been responsible for killing all these people. And, I don't necessarily believe that today. I think that there were problems with the leadership, Jim Jones, and, I don't know how anyone can get people in that number to commit suicide, to drink something like that. But like I said, I don't still know the true story. But at any rate, this all came out of the news, and that was probably a story that had a lot of impact on me, because we did a lot of digging. We were able to interview family members who had not gone to Jonestown, and to get information about what was going on down there. So I think that really impacted me, because it was like, here were some people who had decided, we're leaving the United States. We're poor people. We're mostly people of color. We're not getting treated right. We're leaving. We're going someplace else. And then this is what happened. So that really, had quite an impact.
So what you're saying is not cut and dry. You might think there's some other type of hanky-panky that went on, because you have all these 900 mostly black people all of a sudden become dying. So those thoughts went through your mind. Is that what you?
Well,
a lot of people.
Yeah, to a lot of people, I was thought that probably may have been killed by the government. Part of our research, we found out that somebody who was in Jonestown, that's probably one of the maybe a supervisor or something, had in fact at one point been in the CIA. That came out in the mainstream press, right? So we said, well, hey, who knows what they did? So I felt like that they may have been destroyed because of the political statement that they made. Okay, I'm not sure now. I mean, we'll never know. But
It seems like you were more sure then than now. Why is that?
It's a good question. Maybe because I talked to more people later on who had family members there, who had more information about what was going on. Made me think, well, maybe somehow they were brainwashed. I still, I'm not as totally convinced as I was but the fact that the government sent a congressman down there to investigate them, we know they were under investigation by the federal government. So we know that in and of itself was shaky, the fact that they were. So it's not that I don't think the government didn't have any role at all in the destruction. I guess I'm just not sure exactly, everything that happened. But we were convinced at the time that the government was behind it. We said so in the Black Panther newspaper.
Well, there's an old saying we have that says, always follow your first.
I know, and I can't tell you at what point. Maybe somebody told me later or something, but it's so long ago now. This was 1978, but at least at the time, it impacted me, because I felt like this is what the federal government will do when Americans leave the country and go someplace else. And I thought,
Make a statement out of it.
they did make a statement. No question, they made a statement. There's absolutely no question about that.
Well, one thing, I don't necessarily have the same belief. I know people that killed 900 people that killed themselves, but I also know that one of the main military bases in the Caribbean, well, the United States military, and for its special operations was not that far away from Guyana. And it would have been a real simple matter for them to just, deploy some kind of nerve agent, nerve gas. I was in the military and I know that they had it. I've seen the use of it, the training of it, and it would have been very simple to have done that. And in that standpoint, I believe it was eminently possible to have used a nerve agent, that the United States government would have used a nerve agent in a country, outside the jurisdiction of the United States. People wouldn't know about it. The American media wouldn't know anything about it. But what the American government was doing, they were overthrowing countries. They established a military base in Cuba that still exists right now. So,
And just to clarify, in fact, this nerve gas, if he's talking about, that's what we said, that's what we published in the Black Panther newspaper, in the editorial, getting our opinion. In fact, I wrote that editorial. That's what we said, that we believe that they were killed by nerve gas. I can't remember the name of it. I know I had a conversation, on the phone with Huey Newton about this, and I think, but I can't remember the name of it, but that's what we said. This was our conclusion, that they were killed by a nerve gas, that our understanding of this particular nerve gas, it wouldn't leave any traces.
right.
It might look like it was poison Kool-Aid or whatever.
Well, they had Agent Blue, Agent Orange, and several hundred other, toxic chemicals that they could use. Some of them were undetectable, and especially would be undetectable in a tropical environment. And over the course of time, people were dead, and they could have been that dead a week and nobody would have known, and the effects of the drug would have passed away, out of their bodies. And we know that the government has done stuff like this. They did it in Vietnam.
Yeah.
They did it.
Agent Orange.
Yeah. Well, Agent Blue as well, and others that people haven't even heard of were used. And I know when I was in the military, one of the jobs I had was working in a place that had all this stuff. And it was killing GIs and other people who were handling it, as well as the so-called enemy. And I was lucky to get out of there alive. To be quite honest. They intended, in my case for sure, just have me in there get killed. They'd be one of the people that just died in the course of their job, and that's been aimed at it, And so I knew the cable. That was not a crazy thing to think back then or now. Or now.
Right.
I'm going to take us to the prison movement, which was an important part of the struggle inside the Black Panther Party. One of the leaders, George Jackson, was in prison, had met Huey P. Newton, and also Geronimo Pratt had met Huey P. Newton in the prison system. And there also was widespread support for the prison struggle in the Black community as a whole, but certainly in the Black Panther Party and other organizations like it. And so that when George Jackson was assassinated in 1971,
71, yeah.
and he was assassinated in August of 71, and the Attica Rebellion rose up in September 1971, and those two events touched off a worldwide protest movement. And the international protest committees and everything that came about in support of the African prisoners and of the protest assassination of George Jackson, and the fact that so many Black prisoners were in the prison system and were being brutalized, and the prisoners themselves had become politicized by 1971, actually by 1970, 69 and 70, when I went into the prison system. Prisoners had been radicalized. That's why I said so many knew about my case when I came to the prison system and saw me as a political prisoner, and the fact that I had been able to defeat the federal government's attempt to execute me, I told you about in New York. By the time I got to Georgia, and that's where the case was going to be held, prosecutors in Georgia, in a small racist town in Georgia. And, I was thrown into the prison system. So, literally given a 2 or 3 day trial for my life before an all white jury of rednecks, all white jury in Newnan, Georgia. And they didn't even want to prosecute me in Atlanta because black people would be able to get on the jury. So they sent me to this racist hellhole. That's what the guards call it. That's what the U.S. Marshals call it, a racist hellhole. And so I was sent there, and I was supposed to die right there. I was supposed to be sentenced to death. And they couldn't sentence me to death, so they sentenced me to 2 life sentences without possibility of appellate. And they sent me to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. And that's where I was supposed to live and die.